Good afternoon, everybody. Today is an extremely tough day for us at Entergy, and more importantly, for the 630 employees at Vermont Yankee. Earlier this morning, we told these men and women that Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Station will stop operating at the end of its current fuel cycle and move into the decommissioning process in the fourth quarter of 2014. The exact date still yet to be determined. I can personally tell you that this was an agonizing decision and an extremely tough call for all of us. Vermont Yankee has an immensely talented, dedicated, and loyal workforce, as well as a solid base of support among many in the community. We recognize that closing the plant on this schedule was not the outcome they had hoped for, but we have reluctantly concluded that it is the appropriate action for us to take under the circumstances. Let me be very clear on one thing. This decision was based on the economics of the plant, not operational performance, not litigation risk, nor political pressure. Simply put, the plant costs exceed the plant revenue, and this asset is not financially viable. Despite its excellent track record, Vermont Yankee is a small, single-unit nuclear station operating in a very challenging market environment. The decision to close Vermont Yankee in the fourth quarter of 2014 was based on a number of factors. First and foremost are the natural gas markets that have undergone a transformational shift in supply due to the impacts of shale gas, resulting in sustained low natural gas prices and wholesale energy prices. Second, the plant has a high cost structure as a single unit plant. Since 2002, we have invested more than $400 million in the safe and reliable operation of this facility. In addition, the financial impact of cumulative regulation is especially challenging to a plant in these market conditions. Third, wholesale market design flaws continue to result in artificially low energy and capacity prices in the region and do not provide adequate compensation to merchant nuclear plants for the fuel diversity and reliability benefits they provide. ISO New England and the stakeholders, including Entergy, are working through an organized stakeholder process to identify and gain support for potential market solutions to be considered by the FERC, but resolution of these issues is not certain and will take a significant amount of time. You've probably heard us say many times before that we are constantly evaluating our portfolio of assets and businesses to determine if it makes sense to hold and optimize, to sell, or to shut down. In the case of this decision, we started an intense evaluation of Vermont Yankee's future financial picture a number of months ago. We did not go into this process with the goal of shutting down the plant. Unfortunately, however, after careful analysis, it becomes painfully clear that Vermont Yankee is simply no longer financially viable. Even with this realization, I can tell you that we had many conversations and numerous deliberations as a management team about this decision. In coming to this very difficult conclusion, we considered carefully the effect of this decision on our four stakeholder groups: our owners, our employees, our customers, and our communities. While extremely tough for many, we are confident that the decision is ultimately the right one. For our owners, it's consistent with our disciplined approach of constantly evaluating our portfolio of assets and businesses to determine if it makes sense to hold and optimize, to sell, or to shut down. Financial realities have put us in a position to shut down this asset. For our employees, it provides them the best opportunity to properly plan their future, whether at the plant, at other Entergy-owned facilities, or in the broader industry. For our wholesale customers, it provides more certainty to them and to the broader markets in which we participate. And for our communities, it allows us to begin a constructive engagement as we transition from an operating nuclear facility into and through the decommissioning process. We will continue to be a key part of the communities in which we do business as that moves forward. I would like to emphasize that despite this decision, Entergy remains fully committed to nuclear as an important long-term component of our generating portfolio. We continue to strongly believe that nuclear energy's environmental and energy diversity benefits are numerous and necessary to ensure a reliable and sustainable supply of electricity to protect customers against steep or long-term price swings. No other generating source can provide such large amounts of carbon-free electricity reliably around the clock. I especially want to recognize our employees at Vermont Yankee. They are an amazing group of professionals who have done everything we have asked, including running this plant safely and reliably, and also establishing the plant as one of the best places to work in the entire state of Vermont. They generated electricity safely and reliably day after day and year after year, and we are extremely proud of them. We absolutely will treat them fairly and assist them through this difficult transition. We believe an orderly shutdown decision provides our employees the best opportunity to properly plan their future. We will also ensure that the plant is properly staffed and safely operated until it is shut down and ultimately decommissioned. Finally, I would like to close my comments by thanking our many supporters who have stood by us and our employees for so many years. We have a growing list of individuals and businesses who support the safe, clean, and reliable electricity that is generated by Vermont Yankee. We hope they understand that the economics were simply too challenging to keep the plant operating in the future. We will be talking individually with many of our supporters in the upcoming days and weeks to thank them for all they have done in support of Vermont Yankee. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Forbes, our Chief Nuclear Officer, to discuss the decommissioning process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Our primary focus is on continuing to operate Vermont Yankee at the highest levels of safety and reliability over the coming year. Safety will also be a top priority as we move into the shutdown and decommissioning process. Vermont Yankee will remain under the oversight of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission through the remaining operation, plant shutdown, and throughout the decommissioning phases. In addition to running the plant reliably and safely through the remainder of our operating cycle through the fourth quarter of 2014, the company will establish a decommissioning planning organization who will be responsible for planning and executing the safe and efficient decommissioning of the facility. Full decommissioning is a long process and could take decades. Once the plant is shut down, workers will defuel the reactor and place the plant in safe store, which is an NRC-approved process in which the facility is maintained and monitored in safe condition, and the decontamination and dismantling of the site occurs later. After defueling, we'll then move into a mode of fuel monitoring and performing activities required to secure and lay up the systems. The next step is to move all the fuel to dry casks. After the spent fuel is in dry casks, we will monitor the station and safeguard the dry casks until the fuel is removed when the Department of Energy fulfills its contractual obligations. Near the end of the safe store period, we will complete dismantling and site restoration. Let me close by noting that Vermont Yankee has achieved a capacity factor of 92.4% over the 10-year span that Entergy owned and operated the station. That achievement represents world-class operation for a nuclear facility. The nuclear professionals at Vermont Yankee achieved another impressive feat during the previous operating cycle. They ran breaker to breaker, 493 consecutive days from refueling outage to refueling outage, and they're on track to repeat that again this cycle. We began our comments today by noting that this is a tough day for our Vermont Yankee colleagues. Bill and myself, and along with Chris Wamser, who's the site vice president, were with the Vermont team this morning to deliver this painful news and to answer their questions. The team was obviously extremely disappointed. They're a dedicated, resilient group of men and women, but today was very clearly a tough day for them and for us. But this team has shown us, and this team shown everybody in this room, and this team has shown the communities that they live in, that no matter what's going on around them, they safely and reliably generate the electricity that powers life. You can expect that they will continue to show us all, as we move through this decommissioning process, what an unwavering commitment to safety looks like, and what professionalism and dedication to the task at hand looks like. Back to Jim.
Thank you very much. Okay, what we're going to do, provide an opportunity for Q&A, and to try to be fair in this, I'm just going to literally go across the front row, left to right. Okay, is that fair? All right, we'll give an opportunity. Tim Johnson.
Tim Johnson, WTSA. Thank you for coming. I'm curious, what is behind the move for safe store rather than decommissioning as soon as possible?
Well, the process that we're going to go through is we are required to make a filing with the NRC within 2 years of shutdown. So we will be working through that filing and doing a site-specific study to gain a better understanding of what actually needs to be done through the decommissioning process and the cost associated with that. Clearly, we have the right for safe store as when the plant was originally approved for acquisition, but really probably need to get through the site-specific study and really understand what total costs and impacts will be before we can have a frank discussion on that.
Tom Novak, WKBK Radio in Keene. Now, with all the employees that are going to be let go, is there any, are employees going to be offered severances, or is it just going to be a general let go? What's the game plan for that action?
Well, absolutely, we have put together a package for employees regarding retention and severance. We cannot comment on the details of that, as the employees are just receiving that information, and hopefully everybody would respect that they need to deal with those issues before anything, we have any discussions related to that. But we certainly have taken the time to ensure we are fair to all the employees at the site.
Does Entergy have enough money in its decommissioning fund to see through the entire decommissioning process?
Well, that will be determined as we work through the NRC filing and the site-specific study. We currently have adequate funding to meet NRC requirements, but again, we really can't determine what that ultimate funding is going to be until we get more granularity through a very detailed analysis.
Dave Graham from the Associated Press. What do you expect will be the status ongoing in terms of the litigation with the state of Vermont? You said that Second Circuit ruling a couple weeks ago. Where does that go from here?
Very good question. We have a number of ongoing issues that we need to resolve, including the current CPG case, and obviously we will be changing the end date for the operation of the facility to reflect this decision. And then we will also have the opportunity to work with the state as it relates to an additional spent fuel storage plan. So as it relates to details on all the other litigation that's outstanding, we have to work through all those issues. We don't have a specific game plan. I will tell you that we did have a discussion with the governor this morning, and we want to work in a very constructive manner with the state as we work through this entire process.
Do you expect you'll alter your CPG request or drop it, or what actually happens with that application now?
I think we'll have to certainly alter the request to reflect this new decision, and I really don't have all the detail, the finite details of what we need to do legally to pursue that.
Charlotte Albright, Vermont Public Radio. Just a follow-up to the litigation question. Obviously, a lot of resources went into fighting that court battle, which I would infer from that this decision was fairly recent, and the conditions you describe have been ongoing. So was there a more recent catalyst than the market conditions you're talking about?
No, as you can probably appreciate, you're working in a very dynamic business situation. So we constantly evaluate every one of our assets. And while it may be easy for someone to look back and say nothing's changed, our view of the future is based kind of on our point of view, what we think is going to happen down the road. And we simply got to the point through this most recent analysis that it became painfully clear that this asset was not going to be financially viable, and it's not just due to a single issue. It's not just due to gas prices. It's not just due to cost. It's not just due to market design. But when you look at all of those combined, it becomes overwhelming. And so the decision was made Sunday evening as it relates to shutting down this facility.
When did you tell the governor?
We notified his office this morning, and we had a discussion with him before his press conference.
I'll try to stay with format, Bob.
Bob Waddell, Brattleboro Reformer. With respect to the decommissioning, of course, there are the NRC standards, but you also have to take into consideration what Vermont expects for decommissioning of the site, because what they are asking for is a little more in excess of what the NRC is asking. So how is that figured into your decisions as far as safe store and decon and all that?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. We've talked to the governor about having discussions about that. Obviously, we believe we have the right to operate under safe store. It's the best way to manage the process. We know others believe it should be expedited. So we are going to need to engage in those discussions, hopefully constructively, as we work through the days, months, and years ahead.
Susan Small here from the Rutland Herald. What does this say about the rest of the New England nuclear fleet, Indian Point and Pilgrim in particular?
Sure. Well, let me first say that each asset is unique. And keep in mind that Vermont Yankee is the smallest of our nuclear assets. And so it is at a disadvantage just due to lesser economies of scale. But we look at each of our assets. Pilgrim is probably about 10% larger than Vermont Yankee. It has its challenges, but we're not at any point where we make a decision that we would shut down that facility. Indian Point is fairly well known. We have our challenges there from a regulatory perspective, and we intend to proceed with the relicensing of that facility. But that facility also operates in a completely different market. Completely different market with different capacity, price structure, et cetera, that helps make that plant more viable. So, I know the obvious question is, well, what's next? Have you made decisions to shut other plants? The answer is we've made no decisions to shut any other plants at this point in time. In fact, we believe that nuclear generation is critical. And there's some issues that need to be resolved, and hopefully they can be resolved, especially as it relates to market design and to the effects of cumulative regulation. We would like to see that be more based on a cost-benefit analysis, but that we are committed to nuclear existing within our portfolio.
Could I kind of follow? If Vermont Yankee had signed a contract with the Vermont Utilities back 2 years ago, would this be a different scenario today? If you had a contract with Vermont Utilities, would you still be open?
I don't believe so.
Andrew Stein, VTDigger.org, Vermont Journalism Trust. It's been a rough year for Entergy from a fiscal perspective. Your shares dropped in value by more than 50%, and the fair value of Vermont Yankee dropped drastically on paper. What is the closing of Vermont Yankee, do you view, is this a harbinger of Entergy entering even worse fiscal times, or is this shedding dead weight?
Well, first of all, let me put into context your comment on the stock price dropping by more than 50%. That's probably not accurate.
From the second quarter 2012 to 2013.
No, it does not drop. It hasn't dropped 50%. That means it would have been at $140 a share, basically, or $120 a share. It's currently about $62 a share, and has ranged from $62 to probably $75 a share. But to answer your question as it relates to, our situation. I think our new CEO, Leo Denault, has made it very clear that we have a number of strategic imperatives that we need to complete. And to be perfectly frank, we have our share of challenges, ranging from the ITC transaction to our business in the Northeast. But we have a very focused business plan. One of those initiatives is to improve EWC results. So we're working very hard to do that, and frankly, this is part of that process. So we are hoping that as we move into 2014, we are able to complete a number of those initiatives to position ourselves for success in the future.
Vanessa Mushandin, WPTZ. How many employees are going to be remaining at the plant after going into 2015?
Yes, we currently have about 630 employees at BY now, and the process is basically a protracted process of going into decommissioning. So there will be a step down of employees over time. The actual details of how many people will leave at any given time will be a function of the work that we have to do, and those details have yet to be worked out.
So you're saying the next step, moving from this day forward, is that NRC study, and
Yes. We, as I mentioned, we intend to operate the plant through the end of the cycle, which would be in the fourth quarter of 2014. So we will be fully staffed through that period, and then would expect that as we shut down the plant and defuel the reactor, that we would be able to reduce workforce by some amount. Then the actual numbers will have to will depend on the workload that we have, and we'll have to determine that at that time.
We continue to go that way, just across as
Adam Sullivan, WCAX. A couple of questions about the economic impact that this plant has on the region. You mentioned the employees, well-paid employees. Entergy is also a very big, strong supporter, charitable giving, United Way, local baseball teams. I was wondering if you had an annual number of how much charitable donations you make every year. And also, I was wondering if you have a number on the overall economic impact. These employees, they're buying cars, they're going to the local restaurants, that kind of thing. So overall economic impact from the plant itself being here, and also a number for annual charitable giving.
As it relates to annual charitable giving, we give in the neighborhood of $500,000 a year to charitable organizations. We have not performed an economic impact analysis. That would probably be something that we would work with in conjunction with the state as we look at this going forward.
Clearly, it's a big economic impact, though, and I'm just wondering, what's your message? You sort of talked about how this is difficult for the employees themselves, but is there a message to the region's economy as a whole?
Well, I guess in general, we intend to plan to be an active member of this community, and we're going to have to work through that, and we want to engage. We're not just simply shutting down. As Jeff mentioned, there will be a transition process, and we want to be part of that transition process and support the community. We understand how important this facility is to the community.
Thank you.
Can you give us a sense of how these jobs break down? Because it's not just 634 Vermont residents working at the plant. This is a tri-state employer.
Yeah, I think we ran those numbers. It's a very good question. Kind of roughly put, about 40% of the employees are located in Vermont, and then the 60% in surrounding states.
Terry Holland, my understanding is safe store is 60 years or up to 60 years. Is that negotiable as far as you're concerned, either with the NRC or with the state?
Again, I really don't want to comment on any details as it relates to safe store. We think that's a preferred option, but we really need to complete the study, the site-specific study, and engage with the state of Vermont on how we address that issue once we have appropriate information.
Do you know how much is in the decommissioning fund?
Right now, we've got approximately $580 million in that fund.
And you say that's sufficient for NRC's purposes. Do you
But again, remember that we will get a better understanding of what we need to complete the entire process as a result of the detailed study that we're going to be going through.
So can you picture putting more money into that?
That certainly could be an outcome. I mean, there's been a number of estimates out there in terms of what that could be. I don't have any confidence in any of those numbers until we actually get a detailed study put together.
Questions this way?
Yeah. Kyle Jarvis, Keene Sentinel. My two-part question here. The first part has to do with the Public Service Board and the seeking of the CPG. If they were to not grant that, is it safe to say that that would drastically alter the plans for decommissioning and Safe Store as an option, or how might that impact the decision moving forward?
Well, first of all, we're hopeful that we work together and we're to allow an orderly shutdown of the plant until 2014. Any decision they would make to do anything different than that obviously would impact our plans. It probably doesn't impact the bigger picture of the decommissioning effort, but it will have a lot of impacts to the community itself and to our employees.
Again, Tim Johnson, WTSA. What kind of conversations will you have with the host community moving forward?
Well, I think we're fairly actively engaged with the community right now with our team, and we plan to be at least as engaged or probably more so we can start to explain the process and the issues that we're dealing with. As I said before, we plan to continue to be part of this community. We will remain engaged. We are not just going to, we're not making a plan to just stop that. That's very important to us, especially as the communities are one of our key stakeholders.
For the decommissioning process, will you be able to use entirely the the current employees at BY? Are they capable of doing the decommissioning process, or will you have to hire or import workers for that process?
Yes, as a part of the forward process here, we're creating a decommissioning planning group that will kind of lay the framework out for the preparations, the groundwork for actually performing the decommissioning process. After breakers open, we will transition into various activities that we need to drain the systems and lay the plant up for long-term storage. Those activities, I believe that the site employees are well capable of.
Thinking out 60 years in the future, possibly at the other end of the Safe Store process and final decommissioning, there's been a lot of history in this part of the world, and I suspect other parts of the country as well, of older industrial, maybe formerly operating industrial companies, leaving hazardous waste sites in various locations and so on. What kind of confidence can you give the general public of this region that Entergy will be around in 60 years, or that there will be some entity able to complete that process then?
I mean, I think that's part of the whole study process, to understand what it takes and to ensure you have the resources to do that. I mean, that's the whole purpose of going through the detailed site study and really gaining in-depth and detailed understanding of what it takes to do this right and the funding associated with that.
Amy Cavino, WMUR. Are there implications here for Seabrook Station in New Hampshire, the closure in Vermont? If this was addressed, we're late, so apologies.
Not that, I really can't comment. I can't speak to that. I can't speak to that.
Because?
I don't understand. I don't have the details regarding that facility. Right. It's not an Entergy facility.
No, I realize that.
What does this mean for, this is VPR, regionally for power supply? Entergy has always argued that it's a necessary power supply. What does it mean for our power supply?
Well, if you think about the region, we'll talk, when I speak of the region, I mean ISO New England. So right now, about 28% of the energy produced in ISO New England is generated by nuclear generation. About 46% is natural gas, with the remainder being other resources, renewables, hydro, etc. So what this will mean is that when Vermont Yankee shuts down, you will move from 28% to 24% for nuclear generation. And more than likely, a significant portion of that may be picked up by natural gas. Obviously, other resources will absorb some of that as well. So you'll be in a situation now where natural gas is over 50% of the energy supply, or approximately 50%. But one of the key impacts will be increased carbon emissions, because obviously nuclear is carbon-free, so that will add approximately 2 million tons annually to carbon emissions in the region.
The reason I ask that is that I'm wondering if a company like yours is just shifting your own focus toward wind, for example.
No, we currently have no plans to get in the wind generation business. That could change in the future, but that's not part of our current plans.
Thanks.
I know you've mentioned that it's not just the cost of natural gas, but I'm sure that had was a large factor in your decision. But in any of your planning, is there a point where you could turn around and say, okay, we made a decision to shut the plant, but because of the infrastructure and natural gas, the price is going up, maybe we should keep the plant open after all? Is there a point where that decision, your decision is irrefutable right now? I mean, could you say a year from now, we've changed our minds, we're going to keep Yankee open because the market's changed?
Yeah, the decision that we've made is final at this point. Basically, when we make the decision, the board made the decision Sunday night, and we have 30 days from that period to notify the NRC of our intent, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, of our intent to cease operations, and we're in the process of pulling that together now. But when that notification is made, ultimately that modifies the license, if you will. So the cessation of operation process is designed to be a one-way street. There's not a good structure to work with the NRC to reinstate that license.
So you got 30 days to change your mind.
That's right.
And again, I would just emphasize it's not due to just one single factor. So it's not just natural gas. It's a number of issues that have contributed to this decision.
When you hold on, Susan, I just want to try to stay with the format in case we run out of time.
I don't actually quite understand how you can remain operating until 2014. Your last refueling outage was last fall. Refueling outages typically last 18 months. That would bring you to early 2014 by my calculation. So how are you going to continue operating for the rest of the year?
Yeah, the cycle ends in October 14. That's what the design of the Corps was made to do. And in October 2014, it finishes. We just basically finished the refueling outage here recently. So
Plants can have an 18-month or a 24-month cycle, not necessarily just 18 months. It's just.
So last year, did you put in enough fuel for 24 months?
No, it's an 18-month cycle, but we just finished the refueling outage in the spring of 13, which would carry us into the fall of 14.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that you cited for closing the plant is the market in this region and how it presents difficulties to Entergy. Would you mind expounding upon that? How is it difficult for you to operate as a merchant operator in this climate?
Sure. A couple things to think about, and essentially what has happened as a result of the market design in ISO New England and other markets is there are mechanisms put in place which essentially cap the amount that you get compensated for in terms of capacity payments or energy payments. And so as we look at the market, I'll give you an example from a capacity price perspective. ISO New England is obviously challenged right now as they deal with natural gas infrastructure and some of the, they've had some challenge in terms of constraints in providing fuel to some of the facilities during peak demand times. They've decided that they will pay a premium basically for entities to have oil capacity as backup capacity and to have fuel diversity. But yet, on the other side of things, they're not willing to adequately compensate a merchant nuclear generator for the diversity and reliability benefits it provides. And so they're well aware of this. They're working through this. We have the same issue on the energy side of the market, where because based on their rules on how energy can be priced, they will put artificial caps in place that don't reflect what the incremental cost of providing that energy is at a given point in time. You consider those combined, it has a effect that a lot of generators are not being appropriately compensated because of the suppression of those prices.
One quick clarification. Since the power price agreements with Vermont utilities expired or ended, has Vermont Yankee sold power to any Vermont utility?
It's hard for me to say because I don't know, I don't have details on what's happened in the short-term market, but we don't have any long-term agreements associated with those entities.
Going back left.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Can you just again explain again the timing of this decision? It's very leaves a lot to be thought about. Could you please just tell me what the impact of the current the previous legal battle, the recent legal battle with Vermont had on your decision?
As I said, we know we have a long history with the state of Vermont and been in numerous legal battles, etc. This decision is solely focused and based on economic realities. And so I mentioned earlier that we have a number of strategic imperatives that we're working through. And one of those was doing a thorough evaluation of each of our assets in our portfolio. We have completed that over the last several months and come to a final decision, as Jeff indicated, by the board on Sunday evening. And so it really is not associated with the litigation. It's associated with the fact that this asset is just not financially viable.
Has Entergy ever decommissioned or began the process with any of its other plants?
No.
How do you, with that being said, how do you, guarantee to the community that it will be done correctly?
Well, good question. There is, while we haven't done that, there is a lot of operating experience out in the industry in terms of how to do that. We have people that work for us that have participated in other decommissionings. And the industry has a very good structure around the process and the steps to take to make sure that it's complete and done safely and efficiently. And we import that and it's really a pretty straightforward process.
Sorry, go ahead.
Joe from Grove Community TV. Could you say again, I'm not sure I understood your answer earlier, how you plan to continue and eventually taper off your charitable donations throughout the community in the tri-state area that you currently are well vested in?
I don't think I said anything about as it relates to tapering off. I said we're going to have to plan to engage with those communities, and we'll have to work through that as we kind of work through this process.
So you plan to maintain the level that you currently are now until that time comes?
I said that we'll have to decide what makes sense based on the operation and as we work through that process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Given the protracted decommissioning period, especially with the safe store, are you saying that there's possibly employees who are currently at Vermont Yankee who could still have a job for possibly decades to come?
I mean, again, the details that have to be worked out, but there are skill sets that will engage in the monitoring and the security of the plant that reside currently at BY now, and theoretically could continue on that, until indefinitely, I guess.
What's the likelihood that this has a ripple effect if the economic realities force you to make the decision about Vermont Yankee? Could other closure announcements be imminent?
Well, first of all, let me make it clear that we've made no other decisions on any of our other facilities. I think we've made it clear that we are in a challenging environment, and each asset has its own unique characteristics. So that will be the decision of other owners as they work through the same challenges that we do. but we currently have no other plans as it relates to our facilities to make any shutdown decisions.
How many other nuclear facilities? Again, forgive me, I'm brief this. Does Entergy have?
How many nuclear facilities?
We have 4 nuclear facilities in the south, and then 5 in the north. And then we operate Cooper Nuclear Station also.
Can you go back to the PSP process? What do you have left there? Do you have to ask, still ask them for more dry gas storage space? What was?
Right now, so we have to work through the existing CPG to get that resolved. And then at some point, we'll have to engage them as it relates to an additional fuel storage pad that would also require a CPG.
So what do you need from them for that?
The CPG.
A CPG for another tax.
Right.
Yeah, 2 things. I'm hoping you guys can give us an understanding, some sense of the time frame for the study that's going to take place that you've referred to a couple of times. And also I'm wondering about whether there's any concern for the existing workforce. Presumably some of those folks will say, hey, I'll be out of a job in a year, and they're looking for work now, and they're probably, take the first good opportunity that comes along. How is that being addressed with, in terms of just the potential for workforce reduction prior to the actual decommissioning moving forward?
Sure. As it relates to the employees, we have put together a plan for them in terms of that involves severance and retention. As I mentioned earlier, we're not able to really comment on that. These employees are dealing with this as we speak, but we have put a very comprehensive plan in place to make sure that we can retain the talent required to continue to operate the facility safely through the end of this fuel cycle.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up here in a minute, so it's going to take a couple more questions. Tim, real quick.
Again, Tim Jones from WTSA. You've got a almost brand new substation on site. Why would another type of energy production not make sense at this point?
Well, at some point in the future, that is a certain possibility. But again, it's too early to understand any details or really be able to think about that until we get through the site-specific study. And to follow up on your question, the site-specific study really has to be completed within 2 years after the shutdown. We obviously hope to do it sooner than that, but that's the concern.
Okay, Tom, one more.
Tom Novak, WKBK. So the announcement was very, I'll say, abrupt that you folks came to this decision. How many factors and options were weighed prior to coming to this decision? Can you comment?
I can assure you that we looked at every scenario we could imagine and looked at a number of different steps we could take, because this was really the last decision that we wanted to make. But we feel like we had thoroughly evaluated all the various scenarios and options, and unfortunately it's painfully clear that this asset is simply not financially viable.
Over how long of a time period did that become more clear?
Well, it's like any process. As you start to do an evaluation, you refine your evaluation, you refine your scenarios. So we've been looking at this for several months now, and as Jeff indicated, with the recent recommendation to the board and their decision on Sunday.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming. We're going to have to end this news conference, and again, thank you very, very much.
You have just heard that.